Welcome to the How You Breathe is How You Live, a podcast dedicated to the radical idea that your life doesn't change until you live the truth. They say the truth will set you free, but they usually forget to mention it'll probably hurt your feelings and piss you off first. I'm Jake Parent, the founder of Breath.Energy, the world's first dedicated breathwork studio, and here we explore the deep architecture of the human experience. We aren't here just to talk about your struggles because there is no struggle and the struggle is real. We're here to update the internal software that's been running the show since you were 5 years old. Whether we're diving into archetypes, self-awareness, anatomy, or transcendence, our goal is the same: to move you from survive to thrive. Because at the end of the day, how you breathe really is how you live. This is part 2 of our 10-part series on the shadow. Today we're moving from the judge to the avoider. Avoidance is the ultimate form of slavery because whatever you avoid ends up controlling you. The avoider shadow is the part of us that chooses harmony over honesty. From weaseling out of hard truths to the quiet resentment of the peacemaker, we're breaking down why we disappear or how we can finally start to take up space. It's time to stop waiting for life to be otherwise and start breathing into the life you actually have. And stay tuned for a masterclass in weaseling that involves a kitchen, a former sleeve of Oreos, and a very technical definition of the truth. So how many things in your life are fine? That's fine, but not true. Not wrong, not dramatic, just not quite right. A conversation you keep postponing, a boundary that you almost set, but a decision you keep softening so no one feels uncomfortable. From the outside, it looks pleasant, agreeable, easy, but from the inside, it looks like you're holding your breath. This is the avoider. It's not lazy or weak, but it is protective, brilliant, and quietly exhausting. The avoider learns something early. If I stay pleasant, I stay connected. So it learned to smooth the edges, to delay conflict, to downplay the truth, and to choose harmony over the truth. And over time, that starts to look like a personality. And here's the uncomfortable part. Being nice is not a virtue. Being kind is a virtue. Kindness is grounded, and it can hold truth gently. But niceness is often just a polite mask for fear of rejection, conflict, losing connection. Being nice avoids saying the hard thing, and it keeps the peace by abandoning yourself. Harmless people aren't virtuous. They're powerless. A lot of our society has taught us that being strong is dangerous, that anger is wrong, that conflict or not being agreeable makes us bad. So we learn to be harmless instead. Harmlessness is not morality. It's the absence of capacity. And this is where the hero enters the picture. The hero isn't somebody who dominates or postures or harms others. The hero is someone who has strength and chooses how to use it. Someone who can tolerate discomfort without disappearing. Someone who can tell the truth without needing to attack or to appease. The journey from the avoider to the hero is not about becoming aggressive. It's about becoming whole. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that were set aside to keep the peace. Your anger, your clarity, your capacity to say no, your willingness to be seen, because only someone who can disrupt can actually choose peace. And only someone who has strength can be kind without self-erasure. Before we can understand the avoider, we need to ground ourselves in the nature of the shadow. The shadow is not what is evil or broken in us. It is what was exiled or banned. The parts of us that didn't fit the image we believed was required to belong. Our emotions, our ambition, our capacity for conflict, our willingness to take up space, to say no, or to disrupt harmony. When these parts are buried, something subtle happens. We lose our sovereignty or our authority, and life begins to feel reactive, as though we're playing a role we never consciously chose. The loss of authority is not a failure of character. It is the cost of survival. Jung called this shadow the coward, and the coward isn't weak, it's cautious. Its essence is a passive refusal to take responsibility, not out of malice, but out of fear. It's the inner voice that says, why take risks? Why rock the boat? Why not let someone else go first? The coward clings to the status quo because the nervous system has learned that's where the safety lives. Psychologically, the archetype hides behind what looks like false maturity. It sounds reasonable, measured, even wise. I'll take the high road always sounds so wonderful. But it's cowardice wrapped in morality. But fear that is not consciously owned doesn't disappear, it hardens into paralysis. In mythic terms, the coward chooses the illusion of safety over the vulnerability of the heroic path. And this is where the trickster enters, which was the next shadow that Jung would have used to describe the avoider. The trickster isn't a con artist. It's the part of the psyche that slips sideways when direct contact feels unsafe. The trickster doesn't confront, it deflects. It uses humor, minimization, sarcasm, distraction. This isn't a big deal. Let's not make this heavy. It'll work itself out. I'm reminded here of the meme where the therapist says, I feel like you're using humor to deflect from your problems. And the client replies, so you admit I'm funny. That's the main takeaway here, right? The trickster is what allows the avoider to feel reasonable while staying hidden. Jung described the trickster as unconscious, not evil, not intentional, just unintegrated. It's the psyche operating without full awareness, poking holes in tension without actually resolving. When that discomfort arises, the trickster rushes in to soften the edges, to keep things light, to keep the peace, to make a joke so that nobody actually has to say anything serious about it. This is why avoidance feels so convincing, because the trickster makes withdrawal look like wisdom and disappearance look like maturity. But nothing is actually metabolized. The energy just gets rerouted and stored. The avoider doesn't use the trickster to deceive others. They use it to avoid direct contact with what feels destabilizing inside them. And until that energy is brought into awareness, the psyche keeps slipping sideways again and again and calling it balance. So the psyche stays suspended, neither fully collapsed nor fully committed. Now, the hero doesn't emerge by destroying the avoider. The hero emerges when courage is finally allowed to complete its initiation, not through aggression, not through domination, but through the capacity to stay present with tension without disappearing. And this is the arc that we're entering now, the hero's journey. In myth, this pattern appears inside the hero's journey, but before the journey truly begins. The hero archetype represents adolescent courage. The moment the psyche begins to feel its own strength, but hasn't yet learned how to carry the responsibility with it. When that courage is supported, it matures into leadership and service. But when it stalls, it doesn't disappear or vanish. It just moves sideways again. In the hero's journey, this is what they call the refusal of the call. Not because the hero is lazy, not because they don't care, but because leaving the familiar, even when it's limiting, feels more dangerous than staying small. You see this in all of the heroes' movies. With Harry Potter's "You're a Wizard, Harry," and he's like, nope, I'll just stay living here under the stairs. That in almost every hero journey, at some point, they're going to refuse the call to greatness. So how the avoider operates in daily life is it's how your shadow shows up on a Tuesday afternoon. The avoider is the modern delivery system for the coward and the trickster. And together they translate survival logic into everyday behavior, not through drama, but through reasonable seeming choices. So how the avoider delivers the coward is the coward shows up behaviorally as delay and disappearance, procrastination, difficulty in saying no, withdrawal instead of responding. The avoider justifies this as being flexible, staying even-keeled. Let's not make things a big deal. But underneath this language is a familiar caution. If I don't engage, I can't cause harm. If I don't take a stand, I can't lose connection. Responsibility is postponed, truth is softened, and the status quo stays intact. How the avoider delivers the trickster. Where the coward avoids directly, the trickster avoids sideways. This shows up as passive-aggressive, humor that deflects instead of clarifies, omission rather than lying, which is what we like to call weaseling. I am as it turns out, I'm a world-class weaseler. One of my favorite weasels that I used growing up, and as a married man, someone would come into the kitchen and go, "Who ate all the cookies?" And I would reply, "I didn't eat one of them." And then they would go, "There's only one cookie left." My statement stands. I didn't lie, but I did weasel, and that is one of my all-time favorite weasels.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I feel like nobody was hurt in the making of that weasel statement, but yeah. The avoider doesn't always say something untrue. They simply leave things unsaid. They keep people hanging on by a thread of hope instead of facing a clean conflict. They whisper, let's not make it a thing. We'll deal with it later. This does not need to be explicit. Nothing ever explodes, but nothing ever resolves either. For many people, especially those with ADHD or who are extreme heightened sensitivity people, the avoider pays an enormous cognitive cost. The nervous system is constantly scanning for potential conflict, emotional shifts, signs of disappointment. Many people who are doing this like to call themselves empaths. I'm an empath. Oh, you were raised in a high conflict home. The constant monitoring burns bandwidth. Energy that could be used for clarity, follow through, creativity, gets consumed by anticipation and avoidance. The result isn't peace, it's exhaustion. The avoider doesn't fight, it waits. It hopes discomfort will dissolve on its own, and sometimes it does, but usually it doesn't. It's just, let's sweep this under the carpet until the elephant in the room is under the carpet. Some of the thought loops that avoiders have. Internally, the avoider sounds like, this is just too unpleasant. Maybe if I let it go, it will take care of itself. If I deal with this now, I'll hurt her feelings. If I create conflict, I might lose this relationship. I have finally found balance. I don't want to mess with it. Each one of those sounds logical, and each one makes sense in isolation, but together they form a system that postpones the truth indefinitely. Now, on the surface, avoiders often appear even-keeled, calm, friendly, reasonable, but underneath there's an anxiety about what's being avoided. Fear of a hard-won peace being disrupted, that they have suppressed anger and quiet resentment. That anger that isn't expressed just gets stored. And what gets stored doesn't disappear, it leaks. To keep the system running, the avoider relies on a set of beliefs that sound virtuous, but function as a permission to avoid. You're a good person for sparing other people's feelings. No good comes from conflict. Flexibility is maturity. Someone has to be the peacemaker. These beliefs aren't lies in the moral sense. They're just partial truths used to justify withdrawal. They protect connection, but at the cost of integrity. As we mentioned about the shadow, that it doesn't come from nowhere. It's learned early on, quietly, intelligently, often before you had words in your childhood. The avoider forms in two very different kinds of childhood, but both teach the nervous system the same thing. I'm often fascinated when people say, how could I be any other way? That you have two brothers who were raised by a dad who was an alcoholic, and one brother never drinks alcohol in his life, and the other brother becomes a drunk, or I believe what we now call an alcoholic. And when the brothers are asked, why are you the way you are, both of them give the same reply. With a dad like that, how could I be any other way? That we often think that the decisions and choices we make of how to behave, like, well, I didn't have any other choice to behave this way. You always had another choice. That you could have gone a different direction with this. In my household, the oldest of 5, and I chose to become violent and angry. 3 of my other brothers and sisters decided to become addicts, and one decided to become just oblivious to life. All pretty much in the same environment, but we had very different reactions to how we were going to deal with it. So one way that the avoider gets made is in high conflict homes, and they become the peacemaker. In homes marked by volatility, tension, emotional unpredictability, the child learns something real quick. If I add anything, things might explode. I could be the straw on the camel's back at any moment for anything. So any of their emotions feel dangerous. Anytime they have needs, it feels disruptive. And truth just feels like, man, I'm just throwing fuel on the fire here. So the kid adapts. They become the peacemaker, the harmonizer. They become an emotional shock absorber. They learn to read the room before speaking. They soften their tone. They anticipate other people's moods. That silence becomes safety and agreeableness becomes protection. Avoidance here is not fear, it's precision. The other type of home that avoiders grow up in is the stable or task-oriented homes, and the kid learns to become self-sufficient. There's often environments that value independence, performance, self-control, and being fine. Because you like to point it out, I'm using air quotes around being fine. The unspoken message is, you're okay, Don't make a big deal out of this. You're capable. Figure it out. Let's keep moving. Emotions aren't punished. They're simply unattended, ignored, or neglected. As a result, the child may never learn how to stay with discomfort, to process or metabolize conflict, to express anger without guilt. That difficulty feels unfamiliar and tension feels wrong. Conflict becomes dangerous not because it happened too much, but because they never had a model of how to resolve a conflict. So the child learns to stay pleasant, capable, low maintenance. Despite the dissimilar environments, they teach the kid the same equation or recipe. Connection depends on me staying agreeable, whether through avoiding explosions, avoiding inconvenience. The strategy is the same. I remember one time as a kid that I just chose to walk home 6 miles from school because I missed the school bus instead of calling my mom for a ride. Like, hey, this seems like a much better option. That you learn to stay smooth, helpful, being unproblematic. Don't ever ask for help. It's not being a coward, it's intelligence. That a young nervous system is doing exactly what it needed to do to preserve belonging and preserve its safety. So having that strategy when you're young isn't the problem. It's that it never got updated. What once protected connection now prevents depth. What once preserved, maintained safety now restricts the truth. And the hero doesn't emerge by shaming this pattern, but by honoring it and gently teaching the nervous system something new. I can tolerate tension and stay connected. I can tell the truth and survive. And that's the next step of the journey. The cost of avoiding isn't chaos, it's accumulation. What you avoid doesn't disappear, it doesn't dissolve. It stores itself in your body, in your nervous system, in your relationships. At first, avoiding things can feel like a sigh of relief, like, whew, miss that difficult conversation. I can get back to being calm. But over time, that calm goes away. Every avoided conversation leaves residue. Every softened truth adds a brick of weight to your backpack that you have to carry. Unspoken needs turn into numbness. Suppressed anger turns into resentment. Postponed boundaries turn into exhaustion. There is interest on the avoidance. And interest is never dramatic, but it just does keep steadily compounding. Feeling numb to pain is not the same as knowing how to harvest its wisdom. Numbness is not maturity, it's unprocessed energy. It's a quiet erosion of your authentic self. When you're an avoider, your relationships can start to feel one-sided. You're included but not truly known. You're liked but not fully respected. Because when emotions and the capacity for conflict are exiled, the relationship never meets the whole person. Peace without truth is not peace, it's sedation. Others can feel when something is withheld. They sense the gap between what's said and what's true, so that trust erodes not through betrayal but through absence. Intimacy stays shallow, conflict goes underground, and relationships quietly decay without ever blowing up. What isn't expressed turns inward. Suppressed anger doesn't vanish, it curdles. It becomes bitterness that feels out of character. Low-grade resentment toward people you're nice to, air quotes again. Emotional numbness or quiet depression. A sense of being overlooked or underestimated. This is how social invisibility forms. You're not even the main character in your own story. Not because you aren't valuable, but because the parts of you that carry weight were never allowed into the room. One of the things that I see with people who are lonely may be surrounded by people in their life, but they're lonely not because they don't have anybody in their life, but they're lonely because the people in their life don't really know who they are. And that until you can express yourself truly as you are, then nobody really knows you and you're going to remain lonely. So when the avoider integrates, it doesn't turn into aggression, it turns into precision. The same sensitivity that once scanned for danger can now scan for the truth. The same caution that once delayed action now informs timing. Nothing is lost, but everything is just repurposed. It's given a new job. It's promoted. That your trickster will turn into creative aliveness. The trickster avoids direct conflict. Again, it deflects, minimizes, distracts. But when it's integrated, the same chaotic energy becomes creative aliveness. Instead of dodging tension, it sees unexpected options. It reframes stuck situations. Introduces humor without deflections. This isn't avoidance anymore. It's innovation or diplomacy. And diplomacy is the art of letting someone else have your way.
That was pretty great.
I do enjoy being diplomatic. The integrated trickster knows how to loosen rigidity without dissolving responsibility. Chaos becomes play and play becomes insight. And then you'll move from coward to discernment. That when unconscious, the coward retreats from responsibility. I think we live in a society today where the majority of adults are living in a state of permanent adolescence, where they have not accepted the responsibility of adulthood. And they've withdrawn from that state of responsibility in the name of safety. But when integrated, that fear becomes discernment. Instead of freezing, the system learns when to engage, when to wait, when silence is wisdom, and when silence is avoidance. This is a strategic patience, not paralysis. The integrated coward no longer asks, how do I stay safe? It asks, what is actually required here? That fear becomes a relational intelligence, or the capacity to sense nuance without disappearing. And this integration most clearly shows up in your presence, that the body no longer rushes to smooth things over, that you can hold eye contact, you can allow silence to exist, you can speak fewer words with more weight, that you set boundaries without over-explaining. Nothing dramatic happens, and that's the point. The nervous system has learned. The integrated avoider becomes someone who knows when to speak, when to wait, how to be diplomatic without self-erasure, how to hold tension without collapsing or attacking. It's not passivity, it's strength with restraint. And the inner conversation shifts from, if I tell the truth, I might lose connection, to, I can tolerate discomfort without losing myself. That's the hero's power, not domination, not performance, but presence. So now we're going to bring all of this out of theory and into the body. Because, again, your shadow doesn't live in your thoughts. It lives in your nervous system. It doesn't even live in your words, because it all happened before you had words in your life. The avoider primarily operates in the freeze or fawn spectrum. Freeze says, don't move, don't engage, wait it out. And fawn says, stay pleasant, stay agreeable, stay connected. And together they create a pattern where discomfort is managed by softening, delaying, or disappearing. Again, it's not a character flaw, it's a survival strategy, and it doesn't unwind through insight alone. With breathwork, we're not going to force a confrontation. But a lot of times when people come to breathwork, they're looking to eradicate their shadow. And we're not going to eradicate your shadow through breathwork. We're going to use your shadow to restore capacity. And the goal isn't to push you into hard conversations or override your instincts. The goal is to teach your nervous system something new. I can feel discomfort and remain safe. That's the reframe. A lot of times when people are physically training, when they're experiencing discomfort, they realize that that is a moment of growth that they're experiencing in the gym or while they're participating in sports. But a lot of times they don't have that same ability to notice, like, oh, this is emotionally uncomfortable, yet this is going to create growth and response. In conscious connected breath work, a lot of sensations can come up. You might notice tightness in your throat, pressure in the chest, heat behind the eyes, restlessness in the belly. Those aren't problems. They're just unfinished signals that are showing up in your body. That emotional impulses that were once interrupted because expression didn't feel safe, breathwork gives them airtime. Not so that they can explode or overwhelm you, but so that they can come to a cycle of completion. That you're allowing truth to move through your body instead of being stored there. During breathwork, as these sensations and feelings come up, your mind may want to explain, to justify, or escape. And this is where we gently redirect attention from the survivor brain back to the present moment. As you're doing breathwork, you can maintain the intention of, I can stay present with discomfort and remain safe. Not forever, not perfectly, just in this moment. This is how the avoider begins to integrate, not by becoming braver in the mind, but by becoming steadier in the body. And this is the hero's first real movement, back into presence. The capacity to stay with the sensation without softening it, without fleeing from it, without needing to explain it away or to explain even why it exists. This is how courage completes its initiation, one breath at a time. And integration doesn't always happen in big moments. It happens in ordinarily slightly uncomfortable ones. So this week, we're not asking for a breakthrough. We're asking for just one honest moment in your life. Choose one low-stakes truth in your life, not the hardest conversation of your life that you need to have, not the one that you've been avoiding for years. Just a moment where you usually soften, delay, smooth things over, or try to disappear a little. Pick a small truth, a real one. When the moment arrives, practice this sentence. I need a moment to be honest. That's it. No explanation, no justification, no story. You're not required to be elegant. You're not required to be agreeable. You only are required to stay present. As you say, your body may react. Again, you're going to feel tightness in your chest, heat in your face, a pull to soften or to laugh it off, the urge to explain. Don't correct the sensation, just notice it. Let your body learn something new. I can be seen and survive. This is the work. The goal isn't the outcome of the conversation. The goal is the internal update in your system. Peace does not vanish when you stop disappearing. It deepens, because peace, rooted in truth, doesn't require self-erasure to maintain it. And in that moment, you didn't force change. You didn't dominate. You didn't have to put on a performance. You stayed present. And that's integration. That's how the avoider becomes the hero, not through confrontation, but through presence under tension. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns?
No questions. Just that, again, like, I'm so taken aback at the flow with which everything was just laid out. It's one thing to know certain key points, individually, but then to have everything just kind of tied together and bullet pointed out is, that's really big. And I appreciate the frame of, this is not a character flaw, this is a survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't, of course, alleviate our responsibility to engage with what protected us once to make it not a character flaw, become aware and do the work so that we can drop out of that survival stage.
Yeah. It's funny, again, consciously I can say, oh, that's not a character flaw. But when I'm confronted with a person who is a coward, I have deep judgment about that. And then when I meet someone who's a trickster, I'm like, a fellow man of duplicitousness here.
I'm glad you said it.
You too are dealing from the bottom of the deck, my friend. All right, let's play. I have a lot less judgment around that, surprisingly, said no one. All right. So as a kid, my dad had me read a lot of poetry. No, I was largely raised as a white trash redneck, but also I had culture foisted upon me, much against my will. And I didn't realize until recently how formative poetry had been to me in my youth. So I'm going to close out today by reading a poem. It's called Otherwise by Jane Kenyon. I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birchwood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon I ate an apple and cheese with my friend. It might have been otherwise. In mid-afternoon it gave me a sleep so strong I roused as if from death at the city far away. I dined with my lover at a table silver white. We ate silver white fish in the company of white wine. It might have been otherwise. I slept in bed in a room with double-hung windows and a house in the trees, and I planned another day just like this day. But one day, I know it will be otherwise. Does that say anything to you?
Yeah. It says life is short. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it does. It says life is short.
Jane wrote that at the end of her life. She had leukemia, and it was published posthumously, which, for those of you in Yuma, means after she was dead. And what the poem points to and why it belongs at the end of conversation about avoidance and courage is the poem repeats one simple phrase. It might have been otherwise. Again and again. What it's really doing is this. It takes an ordinary, unremarkable day and reveals it as miraculously precise because it is fragile. Nothing dramatic happens in the poem. There's no capacity. There's no catastrophe. There's no triumph. Just life. And underneath every moment is the quiet recognition, this could end, this could change, this will not last. Most of us spend our lives doing the opposite. We use distraction and safety to avoid the 3 things that actually make us human: feelings, the truth, and the reality of death. We build walls to keep out the hurricanes of life. We avoid conflict, aging, the deep silence of our own minds. We avoid the truth. And in doing so, we don't become safer. We become smaller. Avoidance is the ultimate form of slavery, because whatever you avoid ends up controlling you. When you refuse to look at the truth, you give it power over you. The poem doesn't avoid this. It looks directly at an ordinary day and says, this matters because it will pass. That is presence. Presence is not positivity. It's not denial. It's not pretending things are fine. Presence is seeing the world exactly as it is without the strategies of avoidance. And that's where the hero lives. Not in dominance, not in bravado, but in the courage to be here, fully, knowing it might be otherwise. So this week, don't breathe your way your stress. Breathe into the fact that your life and this life is fragile. Let that awareness sharpen you, not scare you. Awareness is the first step towards what some traditions call the mind of God, not because it makes you special, but because it makes you honest. Don't wait for it to be otherwise to start living. How you breathe is how you live. Take a brave breath.